Hello and welcome to the Straz Center's Arts and Mind Village Chat. I'm Fred Johnson, artist in residence here at the Straz Center. I'm happy to be here with my co-host, Susan Mag Salmon, Executive Director of the Art and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. She has really been the driving force for our initiatives here to really articulate the importance of art as a healing modality. Susan, it's always an honor to have you with us. Thanks for being here with us again this week. And we are honored this week to present in this part of the series a conversation about visual art. And we have some amazing visual artists that are here with us. And I will give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we will start our conversation. We will start with Miss Giovanna Perez.
Hello, thank you for having me. So I am the Community Programs Administrator at the Straz Center for the Performing Arts, and I am also a visual artist, have been my entire life. And yeah, my practice has been a very personal one. I don't exhibit in galleries or anything, but I have studied arts my entire life, graduated from the University of Florida with a studio arts degree, and have used it a lot for just discovering myself, expressing, communicating ideas and such, specializing in watercolor and ink, and just very excited to engage in this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Giovanna. Kathy Malchiotti, welcome to the Village Chat.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. This is exciting. I am basically an expressive arts therapist. So I'm a little bit outside the box here, not just in visual art, but I did start out life as a visual artist. And over the last several decades have been using the arts, all of the arts, movement, music, visual art, drama, and creative writing with people who have been affected by trauma, mostly interpersonal violence, natural disasters, but over the last 12 years working with the military. So I'll leave it at that.
Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Miss Anna Pasquale, welcome to the Village Chat.
Hey, thanks for having me. I am the resident artist for the Creative Forces Open Studio Program at the Jacksonville Onslow Council for the Arts. Here in North Carolina, we're right outside of Camp Lejeune. I work with the military community and military-connected community. And we use just about every form of art that you can think of to help that community express themselves, move toward growth, and cope with daily life. And that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anna. Mason Gehring, welcome to the Village Chat.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Mason Gehring. I am actually from Florida, and I'm here in Dunedin, and I'm a studio artist, painter. I got my bachelor's at the School of Visual Arts, and then recently at UF for a master's in arts and medicine. I've been working a lot with the Aphasia community for my research for my degree. So that's my most recent population that I've been working with. But personally, I'm looking to create programming for art for self-care for adults, teens, children. That's my passion.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And one of the key members of the Straz Center's Arts and Health team, who is a part of each one of these chats and always contributes amazingly, Mr. John Parks. Welcome to the Village Chat.
Thank you, Fred. Yes, my name is John Parks. I am a professor at the University of South Florida in the dance program. And I've been studying dance and since I guess I was about 5 years old, and worked professionally in New York City, where I'm from originally, with the Ailey Company and Jose Limon Company. Had the good fortune to work in and perform in a number of films, and have done producing on Broadway and directing. And now my focus is basically using dance as a healing modality, and especially during this time in terms of stress and trauma, I think it's needed more and more. as we kind of go through this very crucial time in the world's history. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And in preparation for this particular conversation, we had some really great conversations about how visual art is so much a part, you know, Kathy, just as you spoke about, so much a part of everything that we do, every production that I've ever been a part of, you know, visual art has been a really important piece of it. Had the opportunity to, along with a painter, create music, or a lot of my musical colleagues to accompany a beautiful gallery presentation or a visual presentation of visual art. So we do understand those connections, and they're so very, very important.
So, well, first of all, it's really a pleasure to be here again with such a great group of people to talk about this. You know, I was sitting here thinking about the origins of neuroaesthetics. You know, philosophers and artists have been thinking about how the brain changes on art since the beginning of time. But it wasn't until the late 1990s that a guy named Samir Zeki, who is at the University College London, visual systems neuroscientist, started looking at the role of arts in beauty and how the brain perceives beauty and what is beauty. And so I guess what I think about today as we're talking is, you know, beauty can mean many things. And what he was able to discern was that the part of the brain that lights up for beauty is really, it's prefrontal, but it also is different for each of us. And so this idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I think is so amazing because it's different, you know, in terms of thinking about what we call the default mode network and how that defines what we believe and what we perceive. And so I think visual art is such a, you know, it's one of the first senses that come online for us as human beings. It's such a major way we bring in the world. And that the first real studies around this that elevated were about this concept of beauty, I think really is an interesting thing to talk about, to think about today. In our lab, you know, the visual system is so important because of a lot of the work that we do with elderly and with children, and also in thinking about either serious mental illness or behavioral issues. And so, you know, a lot of times when something happens where there is stress or trauma or post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury, the language areas of the brain stop working. You're not able to access them. And I think it's an interesting part of one of the things we've been working on is trying to understand why symbolism and metaphor and visual art and narrative helps to allow us to find words when there are no words. So that's one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about these days. And I know a lot of the folks on the call work in that. So that might be an interesting area to discuss.
That's just off the top of my head. A lot of the people that I tend to engage with are people who don't think of themselves as artists. They don't normally move in that world. They don't understand the language that visual artists have around things. It's very foreign to them, and they don't necessarily feel very comfortable in it. Now, sometimes this can be a plus because that means they don't have to unlearn anything. They don't see limits to how they can express themselves visually. They don't see limits, which is beautiful. The only problem that can happen is, or it's not really a problem, it's a challenge, it's a moment for learning, is when they begin to second guess themselves, talk themselves out of things. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing to watch them discover the arts in general and to discover that, you know, the only limit there is the one that you put on yourself. And then once they begin to consistently engage in a creative practice, we talk about that quite a bit in our programming. It's not just a singular arts experience, it's about helping them step into their own creative journey and creative practice. Much like people talk about yoga being a practice, I think of arts as being a practice. Specifically art journaling, that's something I move in and haven't done for quite a while. But I've taken that mindset about art journaling being a creative practice and translated that over into the program. And I think once they begin to see that, yes, you can do this on a daily basis, it doesn't have to take a ton of time. It also doesn't have to take a ton of money, but you can have this for yourself and begin to really freely move in the therapeutic benefits that the arts naturally give us. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing watching folks step into that for themselves.
That's great. Mason is shaking her head, so I'm gonna let Mason. You're shaking your head. You gotta talk. You gotta go.
I have a very, very similar experience. I've been using art as self-care my whole life because I was a very angry teenager and just was, but I had the fortune of basically everyone in my family is an artist. And so they were constantly just giving me art supplies. And so there's always encouragement. There was no like, what are you doing? That's a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to approach every single person I deal with as we have to get over that hurdle of creating something, because most people are so intimidated by art, oh, I can't do that. And so that's the first hurdle of like, hey, this is for you. Everyone is creative. Everyone has this ability. And for, whatever in our society, it's been taken away and it's only for the certain people now. But everyone, especially for me, it's like making things with your hands is so important. And being, proficient and an expert, not important. Like if you really want to go there, great. But figuring out what you love to do, what can help you express yourself, and like Anna was saying, something you can do every day is just like so important to me. And I have like 70 sketchbooks. I'm a sketchbook junkie. And it's so important. And it should be an access and an opportunity for everyone. And that's what I try to at least, leave with every person that I meet.
I found working in trauma over all these decades that there are some other important principles that kind of cross all the arts. And, visual art is really good for two things. I mean, it's good for many things, but there are two things in particular. One is storytelling. I mean, it tells a narrative, right? What anybody puts out there in an image can tell a story. And it actually, we know now, it stimulates language. By making an image, we will tell 2 to 3 times more about something just by making that image. So that's really interesting that it stimulates language, because Susan mentioned the whole idea of trauma shuts down the language part of the brain. So we've got really something powerful there with that, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing it does, and I think, Mason, I have more journals than you do. Because it's not only that process of me storytelling to myself or sharing it sometimes with other people, it's self-regulating. It calms down the body. And that's a really important silencing thing that helps people regenerate what's going on, because many people who are traumatized are very hyper activated, right? So they're using a lot of energy. But I want to back into John, because movement is a narrative too. And 9 times out of 10, when I start a session with, and I work a lot with military now for 12 years, Navy SEALs and the Army, the SEALs themselves, their families, the Army and their families, I start with movement, because the most profound thing about trauma that we always have to address is the fact that people get frozen in it. And movement is the only way to start to bring them out. So from those gestures, even, we can create images. We can maybe adjust that to mean, well, like what kind of sound goes with that movement. But the movement is I've found now is the really core thing to start every session with. Even if that leads into making visual art, it's that movement. And of course, military, they have been movement oriented. They're skill oriented, they're body oriented. So, with that group, they taught me this. I mean, it wasn't something that I just brilliantly discovered by just listening to them, like Susan said, about the idea of starting where the person is all the arts cross this way, and people that are using visual art as the core shouldn't be afraid to start to infuse the movement in it in some way to get that session started and to then move into the visual art. Because for trauma survivors, that's the most important thing. PTSD is directly related to being frozen in the body and having the body stuck in the trauma.
No, just as Kathy and Anna and Mason were talking, I was thinking about, you know, both the maker, but also the beholder. And so from a beholder's point of view, the ability to look at other people's art and also to look at your own art allows you to be observational and to test what your perceptions are about the world. And so we've been doing some interesting work where we bring people into galleries or into spaces where we look at each other's work and we talk about what we're seeing. And it isn't a critique like good or bad. It's just, well, what are you seeing there? And why do you think that painter put that there? What do you think that could be? And what you find is that when you're looking at other people's art or you're looking at art in general, you tap into some unconscious not knowing that this visual trigger helps you get to that you couldn't have lifted up. So the making is so important from a nervous system point of view, but the beholding is also really important. And I'd love to hear what some of you guys think about that in some of the work that you've been doing.
When I worked with Voices of Hope for Aphasia, we did a project because June is Aphasia Awareness Month. And if you don't know what aphasia is, it's a language disorder that happens after stroke or traumatic brain injury. And so many people have aphasia, sadly, in this country, and no one knows about it because it's a communication disorder. So for June, when I worked with them, I was like, hey, let's make some marketing materials, you guys. Like, let's make some visual imagery to share your story and so people can learn about it. And so trying to get them to think about creating something that would be a visual expression. I sat with them and showed them a wide variety of abstract expressionist painters. And that conversation was almost endless. They didn't want to stop talking about it, which for an aphasia group is not common. And especially I had such a hard learning curve working with them because I had no idea what aphasia was. I just wandered into this very wonderful group who were like, yes, please work with us for my internship. So I'm so grateful for their work. And it was amazing. And at times they were looking at the work and having this discussion between themselves and me. And then, you know, and with aphasia, things can be very emotional. Like so at times people were crying and having to leave. And so managing that, but I still was like, I think this is successful. Like giving these people an opportunity to look at art, to look at just mark making and to have that conversation, to sit and just talk about colors and how it feels and what do they think they see. None of them, I don't think, had that opportunity prior to that. And I didn't know I was doing something very different for them, but it was definitely one of the high points of working with them.
Yeah. You know, we have a series that we do at the Straz Center. It's called Art's Legacy Remix. And it's a performance art evening designed to celebrate the rich diversity of Tampa Bay. So we bring music, dance, theater, poetry, spoken word to the stage that represents other countries, you know, folks from other countries. So it's a real opportunity to kind of delve into the richness of the countries that make up Tampa Bay. And we did that for the first year. And we were really fortunate because Giovanna really just kind of took hold of saying, you know, it's really important to really include visual artists, you know, and it wasn't, you know, because we're an institution that's kind of focused on live performance, and she has really taken that to a whole nother level. And we found that at our performances, and it's free to the public and it's out on the river on our river stage, but we had more people that would come up, and they would come up to the little gallery space and they would engage with the gallery space, and they would actually stay longer to hear the performances. So, you know, I want to also believe that, you know, they were inspired by what they heard, by what they saw, and when they were able to really delve into, especially these paintings that represented different cultures, it really enriched the experience. Giovanna, do you agree? Do you feel like that kind of happened?
Definitely. I think the beautiful thing about Art's Legacy is that there's many narratives within that one theme, and the performers on stage are all telling their story through their song, their dance. But when it came to the visual arts display, first of all, I was so grateful to have the opportunity to set that up for everyone. But the fact that this was a different method of storytelling, and like we mentioned earlier, it's beyond words, it's an image. But the cool thing about it is that there's a story being told by the artist on the canvas, but then so many other stories come from the viewer's mind because it triggers different memories, is perceived differently. So I just found beauty in the fact that people will stand there, look at the visual arts, listen to the performers on stage, and they will create a whole new perspective on the narrative, on the theme that we're trying to bring out to the community. And I mean, that's what we do as the community engagement department, is engage people with one another and hear their stories, and bring your story as well by viewing these images. It goes so far beyond the canvas itself.
You know, there hasn't been as much mixed modality work that I think there should be. Kathy maybe can talk about that a little bit more, but, you know, in research, it tends to be reductionists. And so, you know, getting smaller, yet the fact art is generative. Right. So I think, you know, there are folks that are moving towards these multimodal, interdisciplinary experiences. Some of them can even be virtual, that help address specific kinds of issues. But, you know, like we all have been saying, it's not this or that, it's yes and. And I think the more our field and other fields start to understand that we need to study things in complex, dynamic, messy ways, because that's the way it works. That's the beauty of the arts, right? That's that in the way we bring in our sensory systems. I've been working on a project related to place. And place couldn't be more complicated, right? Like you think today we're all working in our homes and we have this virtual experience, but we still need different things in space. So space is highly visual. You know, it could be the color of the wall, it could be the height of the ceiling, it could be whether the things are rounded or sharp edged, the quality of light. And so, you know, visual art is everywhere. We're always, you know, what is nature coming in? So I think the more we start to think about these questions as complex questions that need to be addressed from qualitative and quantitative measures, not everybody needs to be an fMRI machine, right? You know, there's lots of ways to study quality of life. And so I think we're getting smarter about what the field needs to be able to help people. And Kathy, maybe you have more to say to that.
On here. I was just thinking when you're talking about all the things around us, our art, I mean, that's essentially the sense called exteroception, which is what I work a lot with trauma survivors about, like what's around you in your space, you know, what do you see, what do you feel, what do you smell, you know, how do you take in all those senses? But what I was thinking more about too, maybe this is one off the conversation, but I think it's related, is I was thinking about if Frederick and I sing together or John and I dance together, there's something different that happens there. There's that interaction and there's that community that starts to develop, but it's also in trauma work, it's co-regulating. And that's what I think a lot about. And that's why I think multidimensionally, because we can have a room full of people creating art together. So there's an energy in that, right? In a studio. But when we're singing together, even our heartbeats will start to entrain, right? And we get in synchrony with that person. Or if I'm dancing, you know, John and I'm not a good dancer, John. You're much better than I am. But I love to dance. And it's because of that synchrony, entrainment, attunement, you know, because you have that contact that you don't find necessarily through visual art. See, again, I think visual art has some really powerful things in certain areas, But again, the movement and the sound, however that is, even if we hum together, we start to entrain, we start to calm the body down together. And together is more powerful, because I still believe this, all healing occurs in relationship. It always has throughout humankind. And we have such a powerful way of doing that with the arts, even by the witnessing together of a theater performance.
Yeah.
You do things that humankind have done for thousands of years to be together in synchrony, in entrainment, in attunement with each other. And that to me is one of the most powerful factors that has to happen for people to recover and restore themselves after trauma.
Anna, you're shaking your head, I can see. You're in your open studio. I would imagine that the collective is very powerful. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It is very powerful, yes. But in that space, because of the nature of the community I work with, they're very aware of individual space. They need that space. But I will tell you this, that working in a community like this and helping to build one like this, there is a balance of individuality and community, and both must be respected. And the work there is how to bring that together in a single time and space. And I will tell you that it happens when we were doing our in-person experience, it happened naturally, because they would very much have their own little space and they would work and do, but then they would look up from their work and they would talk to somebody across the room. They would engage with one another's art. Hey, I like what you're making. And another way that that works is by creating a kind of space where they feel comfortable to do that in. Okay, for them to understand that the language that they naturally move in and use is also okay for creativity and art. That you don't have to become this other person to enjoy or create or observe and take in art. It meets you where you are, and where you are is fine for this is where you are at the moment. So creating a brave space, if I can use that phrase here, is important. But the individual and the community, it's, getting those to work together in the same time and space is a large part of what I do and what I work with our art therapist to understand how to do. But it takes both, I think. It takes the individual, it takes community, it takes both for our purposes. That may not be relevant for everyone, but for our purposes, that's what we have to move and do in.
That's beautiful. I think that of Giovanna's work and your coming to the United States when you were a little girl, and how that journey of understanding yourself and the world through your art was so important, and that you've continued to use that as your language of humanity, to think about what Fred says. How did that work for you? How did you find art? Was your family involved in that?
So I come from a family of teachers, so it was always around education. Art is not a thing that's present in my family. I was very new to it. But yes, I moved into the United States at the age of 9, did not know a word of English, but art was something that was always present. I liked to draw. It was something that everyone complimented me on, even though now I look at the drawings and I don't know what they were complimenting, but I moved into the United States and I immediately started taking art classes, just because that's, I couldn't really talk to anybody. That's where I could focus and be myself. So kind of going back to what Anna said, that was when I was focusing on myself as the individual, the artist. I didn't need anybody to be part of that. So art has just been a way to facilitate the way I talk to people and facilitate the way I see the world. And I just continue growing that way. I don't feel like I've reached the peak of my art skills, and it's definitely going to continue being a journey from now on.
I feel like I'm playing a double dutch, trying to fit into where this goes. But no, for me, visual arts comes from a place of observation and also inspiration in terms of looking at art or as either research in working on a ballet or setting a work, or understanding the costumes, the set, the props, and I look at them as art pieces, as things that are connected and that really relate to the telling of the story, but also it tells its own story. And as a performer or as a creator in movement, those are things that really make the connection between, you know, there's a lot of talk in terms of cross-pollination, in terms of dance and music and visual arts and vocal. And so making that wedding, making that union together as an artist really kind of cements what you want to say, what the communicative medium is that you're functioning on. And Anna, I mean, I see the artists in the people that you work with, and I've had the opportunity to see in Creative Forces, you know, speaking to these artists initially, and then them going on stage and performing. I just feel like I have much more a closer insight by watching their art than I would ever have in terms of speaking with them. And I just think that it strips away the visual arts. Well, all arts does certain things at certain times, but looking at visually, looking at a piece of artwork, it stimulates one's imagination, because we have a tendency to want to fill in the blanks. We want to have a tendency to complete something and find some justification for what are we seeing, and make some sort of sense out of it. I think that's how our brains are structured, and maybe Susan, you could talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of doing that, it really pinpoints the fact that art is in the eyes of the beholder. And I like that phrase because it's in the eyes of the beholder. And I think that's really, it really kind of completes one as an individual. There are a lot of people that don't perform art or don't do art, but I think that they have an artist mentality, and so there's something very similar to, and very reassuring, and that unites us all as artists in the way that we think and the way that we approach things. And so, you know, there are people who really function in that way, although they might not consider themselves artists, you know. And I think, Anna, some of the people that you work with, and also Mason, I think that people who are working with trauma can find that, or stress can find that release in terms of performing or presenting their art, you know. And, you know, Kathy, of course, yes, in terms of the military, that's their stock and trade is movement, you know, and so they gravitate to that very, very easily. And I think that also frees up their mind. A lot of the things that the military does in terms of their drills and everything is done by, some of it's done by rote. So some of it is, I think of it as choreography. I think of it as, okay, well, this means that, and you do this gesture and it means this. And so I can really identify with that. And I think that that's a real good entry point to get into healing and getting into really understanding what the body does and what the mind does, and connect the synapses between the right and the left hemisphere. So yes, I think that, and in terms of the whiz, okay, that was the question.
Well done, bring it back.
So in terms of the whiz, I mean, it was very interesting because the initial creator of the whiz was Jeffrey Holder. And he designed the set, he designed the costumes, he had the set design, he also directed. And so much of his creative concept was built into just that one production. And so as we looked at the sets and the colors of it, it was inspiration for us as performers, as dancers. It really kind of helped feed us as performers to really get into that character, get into that duality of the two worlds of dealing with reality and abstraction, and which was very interesting. And I don't think that if it was, I don't think that if the set wasn't the way that it was, it would have been something very, very different. So that
would have, yeah, the feeling of the piece
moment by moment, I think it was very important to have that whole total concept in terms of it. And I think that was one of the things that made the Wiz as successful as it was the sense of the wedding between the costumes and the sets, and it gave us a canvas in order to work within.
That's an interesting segue. Sometimes there's a process and sometimes there's a product. Would be great, Anna, if you could talk a little bit, maybe Mason too, and Kathy and Giovanna, about the difference between process and product, because in a world where everything seems to be so commercialized into the object, could you speak a little bit about that in the time we have left?
Yeah, this is something that is, I don't know that it's unique to visual arts, but it is definitely something that I run into a lot in our community, is because there is such a push from a very young age, schools and whatnot, to produce a product, that sometimes when I have folks come into this program, they get very hung up on, I've got to make this thing, this one thing, and it's got to be perfect. And I've got to make this thing. And if it's not perfect, it's not worth anything. And if it's not worth anything, I'm not worth anything. It's a whole spiral. Okay. So something that we have a conversation a lot about in our group is process and product. And, there is an ongoing conversation in the arts community about, is it about the process or is it about the product? I would say that this is another both and conversation. Many conversations are, but it's a both and. Yes, sometimes there does, it's okay to create a product and for that to be the focus, is this thing. That's okay. But a lot of times, given this community and the focus of this community in this program, it's going to be in the process. That's where a lot of not only beauty happens, but a lot of growth, a lot of self-discovery, all of those very, very good things, therapeutic things happen in the process a lot of times. So that is something that, not only in the broader visual arts world is a conversation, but it becomes a little more weighted when you bring it into a therapeutic setting. Or at least it does for me. I don't know if it does for you, Mason or John or Giovanna or Kathy. Feel free to jump in.
I do want to make a point to what you said. The visual arts world has definitely embraced the process more than the product. I know back then, it was about putting the final product on the wall or exhibiting it, showing it off. But nowadays you see artists recording the process of creating the work, the live streams, the time-lapse videos, the live performances. You see live artists working on their piece. And there's something beautiful about that, seeing them create something from nothing and still putting your perspective on the process, not just the final product. The whole process of creating artwork is all about perspective and your perception of it. And I definitely think it's embraced now a lot more than it was a while ago. Agreed.
Yeah, I have the wonderful opportunity to see Fred and painting and the process, and going to from the sense of conversation. I want to do something, and going shopping and colors and buying brushes and discussing what that why am I getting this? How many colors do I need? How many buckets do I need? And the canvas, and then watching the actual process go down, and him speaking and talking about, I need a little of that, and I want some of this, and it was really eye-opening in terms of the process. I'm a movement person, so all of that just fascinated me. So the process for me is very exciting. The final product is exquisite, and I love to, have something that I can look at, and every time I look at it or see it, it means something different. I get something different out of it. So that also for me, I interpret as movement. In terms of, it's not the same thing. It's something different. Oh, I didn't see that before, but the process was really fascinating, and I never had that experience before, and it was really, really exciting.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, John. And, process time is one of those processes that runs against us. Mason, share one more thing, and we're kind of down to the wire, but we got to give you the opportunity to get that. And
Sure.
Kathy.
Thank you. So yes, definitely. When I'm working with people who aren't used to being creative or making anything, I try to have them focus on the process of, hey, we're just going to play with paint. I give them, safe colors. They're not going to make a mess. Anything you do, just please, use this modality, use these materials, feel it, whatever you want to do. When I work with other artists, there's a lot of getting them out of their own head, getting them out of their own way because of that expectation, because of the making the product issue. And I always have to come back of like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to have a show in a gallery? Are you making a body of work? What are you doing? Oh, you just want to make some stuff and give it to your friends? Okay, so I need you to think about having fun and playing, because that expectation of, oh, this isn't right, can be crippling. Or, oh my God, I've wasted $25 of paint. Like, you gotta let all that go. Yeah. I am the queen of painting over. I have so many time-lapse videos of painting over paintings, and people love it. And they're like, oh man, I loved that painting like 4 paintings in, and then, oh, I was heartbroken watching you paint over it. And I was like, hey, that's my process. Sorry. Like, so.
That's great. Kathy?
Yeah, I'm still back on John watching your dance, Fred. I think it's a dance. I've been in that dance. I go in the art store and do that dance around the paint and the brush.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a dance. That's part of the process. I just wanted to back into an idea because I had to get the buy-in of adult military. First, the SEALs. That was a tricky business. But when you use the word creative versus the word expressive, and this is why I use the word expressive, because a lot of times people come in, I'll have military come in and say, okay, my doctor said to come to you, Dr. Kathy, because, you do something that's different without words, and I can, create in different ways. But that word creativity bothers a lot of people. And this is why I use expressive, because everybody can be expressive. A lot of times people, you have to have that conversation with them about what they think that word creativity means. Because to be honest, I always say to them too, I say, yeah, I came from an art background, but every day I don't wake up exactly feeling creative. But I feel like I can make an expression. And that's, again, when I start with the movement of just being able to gesture. Just show me a gesture or make a sound or beat something out on this drum. You're expressive at that point. And it takes a while to develop that language, to be able to translate that into the art making or wherever we're headed with one of the different art forms. So I think that's a fascinating thing. And it's a thing we all need to have a conversation with people when they first come into the studio or come into our space to work with us through the arts.
Yes.
Fred, I wanted to jump onto what Mason said for a second. this idea of painting over a painting is probably the bravest thing anybody can do, because it really is. It's extraordinary because, you know, there's a moment in time. It's like a photograph. You captured something. And then to say, I'm no longer that. I'm going to, it's the true definition of process. I'm putting something on top of that. And then I'm putting something on top of that. But it's still there. So all those experiences are part of what's in front of you. I met a painter who had done 1,000 paintings on one canvas. Whoa. And the last image, she did 3 of them. One was red, one was black, and one was white. The final one, yet her life was behind it. Every emotion and experience was behind it, but all you saw was white and red and black. And I think that's what's so amazing about visual art, is that you don't know what's behind everything, right? You're only getting a single view of a person, but in that view, it's your perceptions and your interpretation that is as much about you as it is about the artist. And so I don't know, that really, I just think it's so brave to not say, I'm still that person, I'm still that person, but to keep reiterating. And so it's a product, but it's so much about process.
Yeah, wow, what a great way actually for us to finish. I mean, you know, just sort of the culmination of being able to evolve. I love that's really, really beautiful. We could go on and on. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but this has been such a great time together. And I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in this conversation. Thank you, Giovanna. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Mason. Always, Susan, thank you. John, thank you. And thank you all for sharing with us one of your most valuable commodities, and that is your time. We here at the Straz Center, in cooperation with Johns Hopkins University, want to really bring forward this conversation about the importance of art, of creating experiences that really inspire us to our highest level, especially in these times of challenge where so many things are going on in our world that really need to be transformed. We as artists and those who love art truly believe that it's our greatest way of articulating the best of our humanity and moving ourselves to a place where we can really evolve, where we can really eliminate and move beyond the strains of trauma and move into an expressive, creative opportunity for all of us to really grow together. So thanks to you all. Thanks for being here with us. Our next presentation will be on literature and the essence of word and the power of word. Thank you so much. Be strong, be safe, stay well. We'll see you next time. Take care.